Good evening and good afternoon. Welcome back to another live for this day because earlier we have Ryan and now we have from British Philippines, British Council Philippines, and other than Miss Danica. Miss Danica, welcome back. But first, I would like to say hi to our 40 Zoom participants and also to our co-admins. Michelle, hi Michelle. Are you in the house?
Hello. Yes, hi
Yeah,
everyone.
Michelle. Why you don't have
Hi,
camera?
Miss Danica.
Okay, it's okay. And I would like to say congratulations to admin Marvin because her wife delivered new baby, baby number 3.
Wow,
Hello, hi Marvin, congrats.
congratulations.
And then to our busy admins, Manuel, and as well as Gladys, who's a New Yorker now. So all in all, thank you so much, especially to our likers on Facebook. We are 20K now, so please tag your friends
Yay.
and
Yes.
benefits from our freebies. It's all free. Okay. Yeah, Miss Danica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sir Jeff. I'm back. Not sure if some of the participants tonight have actually seen me deliver some of the webinars here, but yes, we are a regular a guest here in IFMG. So thank you again for joining us tonight. So let me just share my screen. I think we started off earlier asking people where they're joining us from. I can't see the chat right now, but actually earlier I've seen people coming from Manila, from Philippines, from Pangasinan, and also from KSA and UAE. So welcome po and good evening or good afternoon wherever you are in the world. Okay, so tonight, actually, this is going to be first of 2 webinars. So this is tonight we will be covering IELTS on computer. So I will be going through the screen, for each section of the test in the IELTS on computer test. So if you're taking IELTS on computer in the future, or you're planning to take it in the future, this is going to be a very, very helpful webinar. But if you're planning to take IELTS on paper, we will also still be going through each section of the test, listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And I will also be giving some tips, test-taking tips. And hopefully by end of the presentation, you'll be encouraged to try IELTS on computer, because some of the people who have taken the IELTS on computer find it very convenient, especially if they need their tests very quickly, if they need to submit it in less than a month. So this would be something that you could actually try. Okay. All right. So before we start, I'd like to go through some of the house rules for tonight. So please do check if you have a very stable internet connection and speed. But if you're not able to complete or finish the whole presentation, you can always go back to the page of IFNG, and this session is actually going to be recorded and it will be posted on your Facebook page. Also, I'd like to request everyone to keep your microphones muted, but otherwise, unless otherwise asked to be unmuted. So if I have questions and if I ask you to unmute yourself, you can just unmute yourself. But generally, I will be looking at the chat box for any questions that you may have at any time during this session. So you can just type in there. Also, we will reserve a Q&A section later towards the end of the webinar. You can also prepare pen and paper for your notes, but then again, yeah, this is going to be posted on IFNG's Facebook page, so you can always just rewatch it if you have time. Okay, so now that we have that done, so we will now go through the presentation. I'm sure some of you already know what IELTS is, that's why you're here. So IELTS is the International English Language Testing System, and British Council is actually one of the co-owners of this high-stakes test. So this is designed to assess the English language ability of people, especially those who are going to study, work, or migrate in countries where English is the main language of communication. On your screen, you will see the 2 types of IELTS tests and the two types of modules. So the two types of IELTS tests, we have IELTS and IELTS for UKVI. And we also have for each test, the academic and general training are both available. So who takes the academic IELTS test? The academic IELTS test is usually required by universities or colleges overseas mostly, and also by employers who are recruiting for professional positions or professional jobs such as nurses. Okay. Now for IELTS for UKVI, this is usually taken by those who are bound for the UK. The academic IELTS for UKVI is usually required by colleges and by universities in the UK, of course. Now, the general training test is usually taken if you are applying for a visa for immigration. Also, if you are applying for a vocational or secondary education in other countries. And also for some instances, this is also required by some employers for other work experience. So for example, for those going to the UK to work as butchers, we have some of those test takers. They're usually required to take the IELTS for UKVI general training. But the advice that we always give to our test takers or to our clients is to always check with the institution, with the college, with your employer on the type of test that they would be requiring from you. So it really depends on their set of requirements. And also with that, you also need to check on the score that they would need for you to have. Okay. So IELTS continues to be the world's most popular English language test. And one of the reasons for this would be global recognition. So IELTS is recognized in over 11,000 organizations worldwide. It is actually accepted in countries like UK, of course, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, US, and other countries, even non-speaking English, non-English speaking countries, especially if they are, if you're applying to study in their country. For example, in France, we have a lot of clients, or we have a lot of test takers also taking IELTS when they want to study in France, in Belgium, in a lot of countries worldwide. Okay. IELTS also has different kinds of test formats. So earlier we talked about the types of tests. We have the IELTS and IELTS for UKVI. We have the academic, we have the module, general training module, and the academic. But we also actually have the two test formats. We have the IELTS on paper and IELTS on computer. And in both tests, we are measuring 4 skills. We have the listening, reading, writing, and speaking. Okay. We also use international English in our test. So this means we don't only use one type of English, British English or American English. We use all kinds of English. So that would also mean that we're not very particular with the accent. So if you're concerned that you have this accent or whatever, don't be too much concerned on that. What they're actually measuring is the way that you deliver the words, especially in the speaking test, the way you structure your sentences in the writing test. So, yeah. Now, also in the test format, we have face-to-face speaking test. So that means that you're able to see the face of the examiner, of the one that's testing you. So we have 2 kinds of face-to-face. We have the in-person. In-person meaning you have to go to the test center to take your test. But currently we are doing speaking, the IELTS speaking test through video call. But this should still be done within an authorized test center. So for example, if you're taking IELTS on computer and you're taking it here in Manila, so your test location would be, for example, our office at BGC. Sometimes you will take the test, the speaking test in the morning before you take your LRW in the afternoon, or vice versa. You take your written tests first in the morning, and then the afternoon you can take your speaking test. But in both instances, you will have to do the speaking test still within the test center and in front of a computer where you can still see your examiner. Okay. Somebody asked, what are the 4 skills tests? Yeah, the 4 skills test, yes, is the listening, reading, writing, and speaking. So yeah, we have, I will also be going through each of the sections later, and I will show you how it looks like on IELTS on computer when you're taking it on the computer. Because a lot of people are scared to use or are scared to take IELTS on computer because they're not familiar with the interface, how it's going to look like, but yeah, we will show that to you tonight. Okay. Okay. Now, in terms of accessibility and added value, the IELTS on computer, the reason why we wanted to do IELTS on computer is because it allows us to schedule a lot of tests. So there are, before kasi with the IELTS on paper, we only do it like every Saturday or Thursday. So that's very limited in terms of the frequency. But now with the IELTS on computer, we actually have more sessions open for everyone. So if you're really trying to, submit your documents in time, including your IELTS test, then, for some locations, we even do our IELTS on computer test daily. So that's one of the advantages of taking IELTS on computer. Also, the results for IELTS on computer is the turnaround time for that is shorter than the IELTS on paper. So you will be able to receive your result within 3 to 5 calendar days. And this will be available online in your test taker portal. Now, if you're talking about the hard copy, it really depends on the courier delivery. So sometimes it's within a week, sometimes within 13 days or 2 weeks. So, but yes, you would still be able to receive the hard copy. Okay. All right. Oh, and somebody mentioned they passed the test with computer IELTS. So yeah, again, it's really it really depends on how comfortable you are with the format that you are using. So others may be comfortable with paper, others are more comfortable with computer, and with comfort, you have that confidence to really be able to achieve your score, the score that you are planning to achieve. Okay. Okay, there's a question here. I was unfortunate to pass the required score. How soon can I book for another PC test? Actually, you can book anytime. That's one of the good things about IELTS on computer is that it's available in many locations. I'll go through each of the location later. And in most locations, it's available at least 3 times a week. So a lot of test sessions to choose from. Okay. All right, I think you're familiar with this slide already. This would be the sections of the test, but very briefly, for listening, for academic and for general training, the listening test would be the same. But for reading and writing, it would be different for academic and for general training. Speaking would still be the same for academic and general training. We will go through each later. But I think the point for this slide is that this is not your standard, this is no longer your standard sequence of tests. For IELTS on computer, as I've mentioned earlier, sometimes you will take your test, your speaking test in the morning or in the afternoon. So depende sa session that you will be selecting. So if you want to take your LRW in the morning, you'll have to take your speaking test in the afternoon. But the point there is that you will be able to take all 4 skills or 4 subtests in one day with IELTS on computer. That's also one of the difference if you're taking the IELTS on paper. For IELTS on paper, your speaking test may be scheduled a day earlier. So you'll have to go to the test center for 2 days. Right. So for no questions. Okay, for IELTS, you are given an overall band score. So in your test result form, you'll see an overall band score and a score for each of the subtests for listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And your score will range from 1 to 9. 1 being non-user or the lowest, and 9, the highest, describes you to be the expert user. The test result for now is actually valid for 2 years. And contrary to what others think, kung others would say, pag 4, bagsak na, or 9, pasado ka, or 6, there's actually no passing or failing mark in IELTS. It really, really depends on the required score. In fact, for other employers, 4 would be the score that you would need to achieve. And others would think that it's really very easy, but for others it might not be so much. So that's why we're here. Actually, British Council, we have a lot of preparation resources that can help you achieve the score that you are aiming for. So we will also go through that later on in the program. Okay. Now we will now proceed to the focus of this webinar, but before that, I'd like to ask if anybody in the group has already taken any computer test before. So I assume some have already taken IELTS on computer maybe, or maybe some other test. You can use the emojis there. You can give me a thumbs up on the chat box if you've already taken any computer test. I think there's an emoji on the, wala ba? Anyway, oh yeah, there. Okay, so Tin has already taken the computer test. Oh, somebody has tried another, yeah, PTE, yeah, okay. Right. Okay, so if most of you have not really tried any computer test, I'm telling you right now that you don't need to be anxious in taking a computer test, because for some, actually, they find it very easy. And as someone has mentioned earlier, she believes that taking IELTS on computer has helped her pass the test. Okay, so let's go through each section of IELTS on computer. But I think I've gone through some of the description of the IELTS on computer. Some may be thinking that the content for IELTS on paper is different from IELTS on computer. That's false. That's a myth. It has the same content. The only difference would be the delivery format for the listening, reading, and writing. So that means it's very flexible because you have different types of delivery formats. Also, you get the same results format. As I've mentioned, you will be scored from 1 to 9 based on the 9-band score, 9-band scale. And then in terms of results, that's where they differ actually. So 3 to 5 days for IELTS on computer and 13 calendar days for IELTS on paper. You also get the same preparation, again, because you have the same content. There's no reason for you to prepare differently, right? So if it's for computer or for paper, you get the same content for preparation, which I will also be going through later on. And you also get the same price for either computer or paper. So it's not really much of there's really not a lot of difference. It's really just more of the delivery. So that's the beauty of IELTS on computer. It's not very far from the IELTS on paper that you already know of. Okay. Okay, one question here, which I will be answering maybe later. But this was from Michelle. She was asking, if I take IELTS on computer, will my answers be checked by a human marker or AI or computer? Okay, so for that, actually, there are sections there. For example, the reading and listening. I wouldn't say it's AI, but it's checked by the computer. And for writing and for speaking, it's still checked by human marker. Because for reading, listening, there's just, you would already know if there are definite answers for reading and listening, right? But for writing and speaking, it still goes through, different criteria. It's evaluated by human examiners. So that's the short answer to your question, Michelle. Okay, before we proceed with each section of IELTS on computer, we also want to let you know that, with IELTS on computer, we have already set up a lot of locations for IELTS on computer, especially here in Manila. So we have one at the gig at BGC. We also have another at Pasig with MFI or Tigas, in Pasay City through STI Pasay, and in Quezon City through Systems Plus Cubao. Now we also have locations outside Metro Manila. We have Baguio with Pines International Academy. We also have Cebu with CPILS, Pampanga with Systems Plus, and Dipolog with Care Immigration, and Naga with Ateneo de Naga. But the list will expand in the next few months, so please stay tuned. If you are from any part in Visayas and Mindanao, you'll be excited to know that maybe later on we have another test center in your area. So stay tuned. Like our page, IELTS British Council Philippines. Okay. Now, the IELTS for UKVI is also available on computer, if you're asking. No? So if you're taking the IELTS for UKVI, it's available in paper and it's also available on computer. So, but for the computer, we have, the locations are at the gig, Baguio, and Cebu. But similar to what I've mentioned for regular IELTS, this list will also be expanding in the next few months. So please stay tuned. Okay. All right. Now, I'd like to show you a video, an introduction of what IELTS on computer and the screen of IELTS on computer. Okay, let me just check.
Welcome to our computer-delivered IELTS Tutorial 1. This tutorial will show you how to complete and prepare for computer-delivered IELTS. For each section, there's a clock at the top of the screen, which tells you how much time you have left. For the reading and writing tests, the clock will turn red and flash when you have 10 and 5 minutes left. The tests will automatically stop when the time finishes. The instructions for each part are in the box at the top of the screen. You can use the navigation bar at the bottom of the screen to move from one question to the next. Click on the number to go to that question. You can also click on the forward arrow to go to the next question, or the back arrow to go to the previous question. When you have answered the question, a line will appear under that question in the navigation bar. You can click on Review if you want to look at the question again later. The question number will be shown as a circle. You can review and change your answers at any time until the end of the test. Click on the yellow arrow if you want to make the navigation bar smaller. You can use the scroll bar to see all the questions. In each of the tests, you can change the screen settings. To do this, click on the Settings tab at the top of the screen. You can change the size and color of the text. In each of the tests, there is a Help tab. If you click on the Help tab, this will give you information about the task you're currently doing. If you click on Test Help, you will see information about how the test works. If you wish, you can also highlight sections of the text. If you need to leave the test room for a few minutes, you can hide your screen by clicking on the Hide tab. When you return to the test room, click on the Resume Test button. That is the end of the introduction tutorial for computer-delivered IELTS. Check out the British Council IELTS YouTube channel for tutorial videos for listening, reading, and writing.
Okay, so in that video, it showed you the different parts of the screen. So it was an overview of the screen that you will see when you take the IELTS on computer. Some of the features there, as mentioned, would be the clock on top of your screen. So we will go through each actually right now. So, unlike the paper-based test, you'll have like a wall clock inside your room. But this time, when you're looking at your screen, you can easily find the number of minutes left on top of your screen. So you don't have to look, anywhere in the room, look for the clock. Okay. Next, you have the navigation bar at the bottom here. So you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you don't, the difference of paper, the computer from paper is that you're flipping pages on IELTS on paper, but on IELTS on computer, you only have to click per number to go to that question. So going from one part to another of the test. Number 3 would be the settings button, which allows you to change different parts of your screen. For example, if you feel like the font is too small, you can change the size. You can even change the colors and the resolution of your screen. So all these tools will be able to help you to see your screen clearly, be able to, take your test in the most comfortable way or in the most suitable way, right? Next would be the hide tab. So if you need to take a break, you need to go to the bathroom, so you can just click on the hide tab because you're not allowed to turn off your computer. So so that your seatmates or other test takers within the room not be able to see your screen, you can just click on the hide button. And the last one is, this is something that we have been asked several times. For those who would still like to make use of a paper, your scratch paper, actually a note paper will be provided during the test. So actually at the beginning of the test before you start. So you don't need to worry about that as well. All right, now we go to the first section, the listening test. So the listening test, of course, is the same with the IELTS on paper. We'll take it for 30 minutes. It has 4 sections and approximately 10 questions each. You'll get 1 point for each question answered with a total of 40 points, 40 marks. Each section is played only once, and recordings include a range of accents. Okay, so the recordings, while you're taking the listening test, actually, with IELTS on computer, in all locations, you will be provided a headset. So unlike for some locations, for IELTS on paper, where it's actually broadcasted live, or you have your big speakers within the room, this time for IELTS on computer, each one of you will have a headset. Okay, and because you're taking it on computer, you can adjust the volume at whatever level you want. Okay. And for the answers, of course, you will be provided a space on screen. Again, you have to take note of the instructions. It's either you will click the word and drag it to the space, etc. Okay. So for the listening test, the 4 sections, the first section will be the social or transactional conversation. The second one would be a talk or speech on social needs. And then the third one would be conversation in educational context by 2 to 4 people. And the fourth section would be a talk or lecture on topic of general interest, which is narrated by one speaker. Okay, I got a question on the chat box. It says, can we write our answers first on a scratch paper, then transfer it? Yeah, the scratch paper is actually provided for you for those for that purpose. However, unlike the IELTS on paper, you wouldn't really have enough time. Because for IELTS on paper, they will give you 10 minutes to review your answers or to transfer your answers from your scratch to the answer sheet. But because you're doing this on the computer, they won't really be able to give you a lot of time, because as you listen to the test, the expectation is you're already typing it, right? But again, you will still be given around 2 minutes to review your answers, to check whether you've answered each of the question, if there are no blanks left empty. So that's also one of the difference between paper and computer. Yes, so you will be asked also to check your headsets before you start the test. Actually, when when you open the section for the listening test, it will have like a player that will check the sound of your headset. And if you feel like there's something wrong with your headset, you can always put your arm up, your hands up, to call the attention of the invigilator, and they can replace the headset if there's something wrong with your headset. So yes, you will be given time to check your headset before you even start with the test. Okay. So here's a video of what the listening test looks like, all right?
For the listening test, you can change the volume by using the volume bar in the top right at any time during the test. For each part of the listening test, you will hear the recording once only. Some parts of the test have more than one type of question. Each type of question has its own instructions. In the listening test, listen carefully for the part number and question numbers to make sure you are looking at the right screen. For some questions, you need to write your answer in the gap. For some questions, you need to choose which diagram label, A, B, C, etc., is correct for which item listed in the table. For each question, click on the correct space in the table. For some questions, you need to click on an answer and move it into the gap. If you want to change an answer, move another answer into the gap. If you want to leave the question unanswered, move the question back. And for some questions, you need to move an answer into a gap on a diagram. At the end of the listening test, you'll have 2 minutes to check all of your answers. The tests will automatically stop when the time finishes.
All right, okay. So that's the listening test. And you've seen actually the different parts of the listening test on your IELTS on computer screen. So it shows there, it actually showed you the types of questions and how you actually answer some of the questions there. So for example, in the video, it showed that for some questions, you will need to click and drag the words to the space provided, right? And even maybe drag the answer to the part of the diagram. So, unlike the paper test, you just need to, write on the space provided. This time, it really makes use of your computer keys and functions as well. Okay, so for the listening test, I mentioned the headphones will be provided. And yes, the headsets will be checked. You will be having like a sound check before you actually start the test. So it's important that you listen to instructions carefully, read the instructions carefully. And for the listening test, it will actually ask you to read first some of the questions before they play the clip. So use that time before and after the questions to prepare and check. So note that note the keywords in the question and think about what type of answers are needed. So that's usually when you are reading through the questions, you will already have a feel of what answers are what answers should you be providing for each of the question. So always take that time to read yung before and after. Okay. Yeah, there are no penalties for incorrect answers, but spelling and capitalization count. So others might ask, because this is done on computer, will you have spell checks, grammar checks? Unfortunately, not, because of course that's also being measured in your IELTS test. So for sa platform, in the IELTS and computer platform, spell checks will not be available and grammar checks will not be available. So you always have to be very careful also with your spelling and with your grammar as well. And yeah, synonyms. Again, that would be useful, especially when they are asking for questions. You will need to look for the similar answers or the synonym of the questions. So some of the features that were discussed earlier would be the scroll bar for the volume on top of the screen. So again, you can adjust the volume at any time. And then the types of answers or questions in the listening test, you can type the answer in the gap, identify the diagram label, click and drag into the gap which was shown to you earlier, or move the answer into the diagram. So those are just some types of the questions in the listening test. But I will show you later where you can get a lot of interactive exercises free for you to practice on. So yeah, I will be mentioning that to you later on. Okay. Again, you won't have 10 minutes to transfer your answers. You only have 2 minutes to check on your answers towards the end. So take the time now while you're preparing for the test to be comfortable with listening and typing your answers at the same time, because you'll only have enough, like 2 minutes, to recheck. So yeah. All right. Now, in terms of listening, it was mentioned earlier that for the listening test, it uses different kinds of accents. So there's not just one accent that will be used within the test. They can use British English, American English, or whatever type of English. So it's important that you listen to these kinds of accents earlier on while you're preparing. And these are just some of the materials that you can use. These are actually very accessible to you because everybody watches television or movies, listen to podcasts, maybe radio lectures, online videos. And yeah, others would recommend you watching BBC because some of the newscasters there or the announcers would have very thick accents. So it helps, to familiarize yourself with different accents. We also have the Australian Broadcasting Company. Personally, I do love watching films, different kinds of films, British and American, even Netflix, right? So others would say, listen to podcasts, take down notes. So, but apart from that, we also have some listening practice tests for you available on our website, which I will be showing to you also later on. Okay. Now we move on to the reading test. Okay. So for the reading test, we all know it's 60 minutes. We have 40 items and 3 sections. And again, 1 mark for each correct answer. Similar to actually all other sections of the tests, grammar and spelling would count. So please be careful also. Double check your grammar and spelling. Okay, now the reading section is actually different for academic and general training. But the number of sections will still be the same. So for academic, the texts are usually longer than the general training. The materials that are used in academic are usually from journals, magazines, books, so more academic. While in general training, of course, they still use the books, magazines, and newspapers, but they also use, other simpler materials like notices, advertisements, handbooks. The academic reading text would be more relevant to study, while the general training reading text would be more relevant to life in an English-speaking country. So there's this, difference in terms of the content when it comes to academic and general training. Again, it does suit the requirement of organizations. That's why they would let you know if they need academic or general training. Okay. Nevertheless, the type of questions that you have seen earlier would be the same for both. Okay, so this is a video of the reading test section in the Ielts on computer.
In the reading test, the text appears on the left and the questions on the right. To see all the text and the questions, you will need to use both scroll bars. For some questions, you need to choose an answer. If you want to change your answer, click on a new answer. If you want to leave a question unanswered, click on the answer again. To look at the next question, just click on the question itself. For some questions, you need to choose more than one answer. If you want to change any of your answers, click on the answer you want to change and then click on your new answer. If you want to leave any of the questions unanswered, click on the answer again. For some questions in the reading test, you need to choose which paragraph or section contains the information listed in the table. Remember to scroll to read all the text. For each question, click on the correct space in the table. If you want to change an answer, click on Your New Answer. If you want to leave the question unanswered, click on the answer again. For some questions in the reading test, you need to click on a heading for a paragraph or section and move it into the gap. If you want to change your answer, move another heading into the gap. If you want to leave the question unanswered, move the heading back. And for some questions, you need to write your answer on a gap in a diagram. If you wish, you can also highlight sections of the text. To do this, left-click and drag your cursor over the section of the text or question you wish to highlight. Then, right-click and select the highlight option. To remove highlighting from the text, right-click on the highlighted area and select Clear. If you wish to remove all highlighting from the screen, right-click on a highlighted area and select Clear All. You can also make notes on a section of text. To do this, left-click and drag the cursor over the section of text or you want to make notes about. Then right-click and select the Notes option. Your chosen section of text will be highlighted and a yellow notepad will appear. You can write your notes on this. Click on the X in the notepad to hide your notes. To see your notes again, click on the highlighted section of the text. If you want to see which areas of highlighted text have notes, move the cursor slowly over each area of highlighted text. If a small orange box appears, it means that the highlighted text contains notes. To remove notes from text or questions, right-click on the highlighted area and select Clear.
Okay, so that's actually the video for the reading test. It shows, some of the test formats there are almost the same as the one for the listening, for the listening test. So you have to click and drag some of the answers, etc. There was a question here on the chat box. If there's, in case there is a malfunction of headphones in the middle of the listening test, will the test continue to run? And your time, of course, will continue to run. So actually, when this happens, which rarely happens because you will be definitely asked to check your headphones before you start. So you have to really make sure, make the necessary adjustments while checking your headphones. It's really very important because why? Because you will need to, it will continue to run until you raise your hand and ask the invigilator or the test day supervisor to check. You have to let them know immediately that there's something wrong with your headphones. If that happens, they will go to your station, they will pause the test, and then they will also, check if there was a malfunction, if the malfunction is proven to be correct. So in that case, they will, it's not, the time will not run, so they will pause the test and you will have to continue. But in some cases, kunyari power interruption naman, it will also be paused and then you'll have to maybe retake it again. So again, the test day supervisor will decide on your fate actually. So it's either they just pause the test or they will, discontinue the test depending on the findings of the test day supervisor. But to be honest, that rarely happens. And we do encourage everyone to really, because once it's working, it will always work during the whole test because that's also being checked before you take the test. We have regular checks for that. So yeah, I do encourage that you really take the time to check because it would be a hassle talaga if you encounter that problem in the middle. Okay, hang on. Yeah, so yun lang. You will be, if your test will be paused, you will be, you will be given the opportunity to continue your test, pero malilate ka lang. You will be last to complete your test. Yes, so yeah. Anyway, yeah, that's my advice for those taking the test. All right. So again, from the video, we've seen really interesting features of the IELTS on computer reading test. Diba? While you're taking the test on paper, if you're taking the test on paper, you will, if you want to take note of some important names and dates and everything, you'll have to write it down. But the good thing about IELTS on computer is that there are features available for you, like the highlighting function and the note-taking function, which I find really very useful. It's like reading an ebook and having all of these tools available. Okay, so there are two scroll bars on the screen. So unlike the paper where you flip from one page to another, dito you can see both the question and the paragraph, the text basically. So you can just scroll up and down to look at the whole text and to actually do some of the other questions. And then you also have the highlight, as I've mentioned, and you may also take notes. So with most of our test takers, they don't actually use their scratch papers anymore, but they do make use of their tools available. Okay. So here are some tips for the reading test. Number one, again, this is something standard for all the sections. Follow instructions carefully. If they say one word, you have to put one word. If they say two words, you have to be able to provide two words. So always check the instruction. Check your spelling, if it's singular or plural. Third would be find evidence in the text for your answer in case of a true, false, or not given question. So it's also in the context of the paragraph. Next would be focus precisely on what you're asked to do in completion time. Again, I've mentioned this earlier. If you're asked to provide two words, you have to provide two words. Okay. So okay, I see no questions for the reading section. We can now proceed to the next one. Okay, so these are just some of the skills that you can use when doing the reading test. So we have the skimming and scanning. Skimming would be identifying key themes or general ideas, and scanning would be looking for specific information. So if the question is requiring you to provide a name, you can just scan for the names inside the paragraph for a date, etc. And you don't need to read every word in the article. So these are just some of the skills that you might want to practice on while for the reading test as well. Because I know you're given 60 minutes, but for some of the text, it might actually be longer. So if you're trying to read each line, each word, that might actually take a lot of time on your end. But again, at the end of the day, it really depends on your style. To be honest, my style is really to read everything, but I'm a fast reader. So I practice that along the way. But while reading, I take notes, etc. So, I mean, it really all depends on how you think you can answer all the questions within a given time, right? Practice is a key. Okay, some tips for you to remember: don't spend too long on one passage or question. This is where your skimming and scanning can be very, very useful. Don't try to read every word. That is also correct, especially for, for some of the sections, for some of the questions when they're just asking for the name or the date, then you can just look for the name or the date within the paragraph. Don't worry if you do not know anything about the subject of the text. All the answers can be found in the text. So you just really need to understand the expectation or the answers that are being asked for in each question, right? So it's all in the text. Don't worry if there is a word that you do not understand, you may not need to use it, okay? So these are just some of the things, some of the things that you can do to practice your reading skills. Again, aside from aside from practicing these skills, you can also make use of the practice test materials that we have available on our website. All right. Okay. Now we move on to the writing test. Okay. So the writing test, we have again task 1 and task 2 for both academic and general training. For task 1, it's a description of information. So for AC, for academic, it's possibly a graph or a data set, a line graph, a bar graph. But for GT, it's actually, you will be asked to write a letter. Now, the minimum for this would be 150 words, and the recommended time for this is 20 minutes. The reason, okay, so let's go to task 2 first. So the task 2 is the same for both academic and general training. It's usually just an essay in the form of an argument, discussion, or report on a given topic. So questions like, do you agree or disagree? So this is where those questions will be present. So the minimum number of words would be 250 words, and the recommended time is 40 minutes. And the reason behind that is because task 2 would bear bigger points or larger points than task 1. So others would recommend, would do the task 2 first before doing the task 1. Again, it really depends on, how comfortable you are with, doing the more difficult task first over the, the other ones. So But I think what's really more important here is that you're able to familiarize yourself on the different questions in both task 1 and task 2. Okay. And writing is assessed on different criteria. So somebody has asked earlier if this is being marked by the computer or by AI. No, it's not, because we have this criteria. We have examiners really reading through your writing outputs and assessing each output based on this criteria. We have task achievement and task response, cohesion and coherence, lexical resource, and grammatical range and accuracy. Okay. Actually, these criteria, we have a separate webinar for that, actually discussing all of these in detail. And I would recommend that you attend those webinars, which I will be sharing with you also the links to our website on where you can register for that test. But the purpose of this webinar is really just to go through the IELTS computer test for those who are going to take the IELTS computer. Okay, but very quickly for the writing test, you will be expected to analyze the question and address the topic in a logical way. So this is where the task achievement and task response comes in. So if you're asked, to give your opinion, whether you agree or disagree, make sure that you're able to state whether you agree or disagree. I've learned from one of the IELTS experts, if you feel like you are in the middle, you don't completely agree or disagree, you can just write down all of the reasons why so. But at the end of the paragraph, you will still need to tell the reader where you're leaning towards more. So for example, at the end of the paragraph, you can just say, I'm leaning towards agreeing with the statement, etc. You always have to, kumaga, parang sagutin yung question na, do you agree or disagree? Okay, so yeah. Next would be organize your ideas effectively and persuasively. Express your opinion clearly on a given topic and express a convincing argument. All right, so the biggest difference, of course, between writing on paper and the writing test on computer is that, yung penmanship is not very much important. Well, it hasn't really been, but other people would be very concerned with their penmanship. Baka hindi daw mabasa ng examiner. So this is where your IELTS on computer would be very, very helpful, because you don't need to worry about that. So this is here's a video of the writing section of the IELTS on computer.
There are two parts to the writing test, Part 1 and Part 2. You can answer the parts in either order. You write your answer in the space on the right of the screen. Your answers are saved automatically. You do not need to press Enter on your keyboard. For the reading and writing tests, the clock will turn red and flash when you have 10 and 5 minutes left.
Okay, so so just to go through each of the section of the IELTS on computer for the writing, we have, you can answer the questions in either order. You can flip from the part 1, task 2. So if you feel like you want to go with task 2 first, you can do so. And then you also have, this is another question that we always get. There are no grammar or spelling checks, similar to other sections of the test. That's not available on this platform. But what's available is actually the word count function. So for others kasi on paper, they will count by the number of words, isa-isa. But for computer, you have that function at the bottom of the screen telling you how many words you have already written. Okay. And because this is done on computer, you can do copy, paste, and erase. So Control V, Control C, you have that also available on Ielts on computer, but not the spelling or grammar checks. Okay. Okay, so these are some of the tips provided by our Ielts expert for each of the tasks. Okay, let me just go through some of the slides for a minute, Robert. So these are just some of the tips. You have to read the question carefully, analyze the task, and underline important information. Yeah, so I think it's really important that you will be able to read what, identify what is being asked for you on each of the tasks. Diba? So that would actually answer to the task response criteria for your writing test. Spend the time understanding and information on the graph. So for academic, when you're being asked to give a description of the graph, you will only have to describe the task. So we don't need to analyze, give your conclusions about the task. So what's important would be to highlight yung important facts or important information in the graph, what is actually compared in the graph, etc. But no need for you to draw conclusions from the graph. Okay. Yes. Again, before you go straight to writing your answers, take time to plan like a guide, like outline of what you want to put on your first paragraph, second paragraph, third paragraph, your overview or your conclusion. So, you can do that for 1 to 2 minutes, and then you can proceed with writing your writing. Okay. Yeah, for general training writing task 1, almost the same. It actually applies to both general training and academic. Plan ahead, plan what you are going to say, do an outline, make sure that you identify what is being asked and you answer what is being asked, and make sure that you don't, that you have the correct spelling and you have the correct grammar. And you can do that, the spelling and grammar check, you can do that towards the end, during your last few minutes. Because it's really important. I think for me, the most important one would be the content of your writing output. Again, we've mentioned provide an overview. They will also look at that, because that first sentence would definitely tell the examiner that you have understood what is being expected, what's being asked, and also gives them an idea that you have understood what the graph tells you. So, yeah. So some of the things to remember. Yeah, actually, this is just the same with the previous plan, and organize a summary of everything that we discussed about the tips for the writing test. Okay. Yeah, no bullet points. So it would be important for you to write everything in a paragraph form, not in incomplete sentences. So stick to the topic and don't try to change the focus of your answers. Always try to answer what is being asked. Okay. All right. So these are just some of the tips, but again, we will be inviting you for another webinar, which will be available for everyone. We do run these webinars bi-monthly, and it's being what do you call this? It's facilitated by one of our IELTS experts internationally. Okay. We have a question here. For clarification purposes, in writing task 1 and 2, is there a need for indents at the start of the sentence? Well, format is not necessarily what do you call this, marked. what the examiners would be expecting is that you're able to answer the question, because the others would have like a block format for their paragraphs. They don't really put indents, but the point here is you have to be consistent. If you did an indentation on the first paragraph, then you should probably do it for the second and third paragraph. If you didn't do it in the first time, make sure it's really very consistent all throughout. Yeah, so that's just one advice. But there is really no, your marks won't be deducted naman if you don't have the, if it's not indented or whatever. So it's still the content, and it's still, it's still based on the criteria that was mentioned earlier. So yeah. Okay. Speaking test. So okay, so we are done with the listening, reading, writing test, and these 3 tests are actually done all together at one session, and the speaking test is done separately. So as I mentioned before, we do it in person, face to face, but now you still do it face to face, pero using a computer. So we call that the video call speaking test. Okay, so here's an overview of the speaking section. The speaking takes you about 14 minutes, and it's a one-to-one interaction, again, with an IELTS examiner, and it is recorded. The criteria that's being assessed, that are assessed here, would be fluency and coherence. Lexical resource would be your vocabulary. Grammatical range and accuracy would be the correct usage of grammar, of course, and pronunciation. It's not so, the pronunciation is not so much on the accent, but how you pronounce the words, right? Okay. So we have 3 parts of the speaking section. The first part would be an introduction and interview. So first, the examiner would be asking you questions to verify your identification. And then they will be asking you questions about familiar topics about where you live or your family, what you do. So yun pa lang, pwede nyo nang i-practice talaga yun. So try to come up with some things about yourself, what you do, what you're currently doing, where you're living, your family, etc. So do prepare for that already beforehand. The second part, however, you will be given a topic or a cue card, and so it's anything under the sun. I think the advantage of taking the speaking test in IELTS is that you can, it's not very particular to a certain subject. So for example, if you're a medical professional, but you're not currently practicing, and then your speaking test would ask you to talk about, some things medically na hindi tayo masyadong familiar, ganun, or we forgot na, that might be, that might be an added anxiety on your end, right? But for IELTS speaking, it's general topics, anything under the sun. And to be honest, they're not really checking if you know the correct answer or not. So you can just talk about anything, but what they will be looking for would be the way that you structure your sentences, the way you pronounce, etc. So it's not so much on the content, to be honest. The part 3 would be a discussion. So for example, they gave you a topic on part 2. Part 3 would be more of like a question and answer, and it will, the examiner will actually be taking some hints from your answers in part 2, right? So it will be more like conversational for part 3. Okay. Okay, so we have a question on the chat box. Yes, actually, she was asking, or he was asking, if the words will be automatically saved. Yes. So as you type, as you go through your test, these will be automatically saved in real time, actually. Okay, again, can we answer in all capital letters for the IELTS on computer? Yeah, I think this was also asked previously, and there's really, it doesn't really matter if you use all caps or not, but my suggestion really is to still use the standard one. So because sometimes when you're asked to provide a proper noun or a proper name, you have to, of course, make the first letter, all capitalized, etc. So I would still recommend that you use the standard way of, writing. And this is on computer, so you can just check whether you're on shift or something, di ba? Kung naka-caps lock ka or not. You can definitely delete it anytime or retype it anytime. Okay. All right. Next, when hiding the screen, does the timer of the exam? Yes, it's being paused. Yeah. Right. Okay. So thanks very much for all of your questions. All right. Next. Okay. All right, so this is what the examiners will be expecting from the speaking test. So you'll be expected to communicate your opinions and information on everyday topics and common experiences. So that's your part one. Speak at length on a given topic using appropriate language, part two. So I've mentioned you will be given a cue card, or on the screen, you will be given a topic, and they will also be asking you to prepare answers for example, previously I took the test, they were asking me about, what's the film that you have watched recently? Tell me what you like about it, and why you think it's really good. So while I was planning for my answers, I base it on, like a 3-point style. So I like it because 1, 2, 3. Why do you think it's good? It's good because the cinematography is great. One second would be the location, etc. So you always have to prepare, some points on how you would answer those questions. And that's actually related to the next one, which is organize your ideas coherently. So like, for example, for the first point, it would be about how the film was created, the actors, etc. The second would be about the meaning of the film. So, and then the third would be express and justify your opinions. Again, it's really all about practice. It's not so much about how much you know about a certain topic, but it's actually how you structure your sentences. So, and that comes in practice talaga when you practice when you do the IELTS test. Can we look at the notes we wrote on the speaking part too? Sorry. When we are answering at length. Yes, you can actually. Yeah. The next question will be, okay, there are no more questions. But yes, you can definitely look at your notes when answering, okay? But I think the key point here is that you have to be able to speak very naturally, structure, you have your answers in a structured way. So, but yeah, you can always look at your notes. All right. Okay, so here are some really useful tips for the speaking test. Okay, number one would be, do try to relax. The examiner will give you plenty of opportunity to speak. So others kasi would go into the speaking test room really very nervous and then mental block, diba? So do try to relax. And here's one thing that I always, because I've taken some of the tests before, no? But one of the things that I always put in mind is that, I prepared for this one. So preparation really comes very handy. Also, I know that speaking test is actually one of the, I would have to say, the strengths of Filipinos. So on the average, we're actually doing well, around 6.5. So, you can definitely do this actually. So we are really very good in speaking. Speak clearly, of course. Don't eat your words. So for you to be able to speak clearly, sometimes I do it not really very slowly, pero take time to deliver your sentence in such a way that your listener would be able to grasp what you're saying, right? Again, I've mentioned this earlier, be prepared to talk about yourself. That's a standard. Your first part will be about yourself. So ngayon pa lang, prepare some points about yourself, what you do, your work, your family, where you live, where you're currently living, etc. Right. Give opinions on topics relevant to you and your background, and answer the questions as fully as you can. So there are also sometimes that when you have so many things to talk about, the speaker would be raising their hand and will ask you to stop. So don't be flustered by that. Just pause and then smile. Don't look so flustered kapag ini-interrupt kayo. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that your time is up, right? Okay, so these are just again some do's and don'ts. Don't talk too fast or too slowly. Don't use your first language, of course. You're being assessed in an English test. Don't worry about making occasional mistakes. Yeah. So, for example, you were delivering your answer, and then at the back of your head, oh, may nasabi akong wrong grammar. You don't have to go back and correct yourself. Just continue, delivering your answer. But try to make an effort not to do that mistake again. So kunyari yung plural or singular, diba? So you don't have to correct yourself very often. And don't prepare speeches and reproduce memorized answers, because they are definitely going to notice that one. Yeah, don't worry about occasional hesitations like the ums or the pauses and everything. But don't, like some would say, okay lang ba mag ganyan, how many times can I say it's okay to be saying that, but you don't really, you also have to try to avoid it as much as you can, so that's why for the first part, prepare points already, because it's all going to be about yourself. The second part, you'll be given time naman to structure your content. So take the time to structure everything. You'll be actually given a piece of paper to write down your bullet points, basically. So while you write down, you also have to talk about, okay, this point I will talk about first, and then pagkatapos yun, I'll talk about this, ganyan. So while you're doing bullet points of the answers that you can provide, you should also be able to say, parang structurein mo na yung answer. So, and that would actually avoid, pauses and that would make you look like you have nothing else to say anymore. So you're really required to speak at length. So make sure that you have a lot of bullet points, a lot of baon na answers for that question. Right. Yeah, again, as I mentioned, don't worry if the examiner interrupts. It only means your time is up. So don't be flustered. Don't be anxious about that. Okay. So we're towards the end of our presentation already. We've finished all of the sections. So I'd like to know if you have other questions on the chat box. Okay, we don't have any other questions. Okay, just very briefly, if you're going to take the test with us, we definitely give a lot of attention to our health and safety measures, because that is one of our priorities. And even if we are already in alert level 2, we still have these health and safety measures in place. Okay, so the usual, we have a declaration form, and we encourage every test takers who are feeling sick or who are undergoing quarantine not to take the test. Okay, on the test day, here's some of the important reminders that we will be also sending to you once you've confirmed your test with us. You will need to provide a proof of vaccination or a negative antigen or PCR test. So that's already being asked by some of the establishments, and sorry, and we're also doing that for the safety of the staff and also for yourself, for the test takers. So we do encourage everyone to read through the health and safety measures before attending or before taking the test with us. Always please take note of that, because for some locations, please do read the emails that we send you, the reminders and everything, because sometimes some of the health and safety measures would differ from one location to another, depending on the hotel's requirement or the location's requirement. But these three, this is standard for British Council test takers as well. All right. So the standard one, we do temperature screening in the test venue. We encourage everyone to be there at least 30 minutes, because we do have all of these steps that you have to go through for health and safety check. We always encourage everyone to maintain physical distancing. It's still very important because COVID is still here, although we do have less and less cases every day. Face-to-face speaking, neither test taker nor examiner should remove their face mask. So yes, we are still requiring everyone to use a face mask, face shield, depending on the venue. All right. So if you'd like to know more about our health and safety measures, we have the link down below. Take a screenshot and you can visit the website later. But what I'm really excited to talk to you about would be our preparation materials. So for British Council test takers, we are providing free online course. So we call it Road to Ielts. So if you don't have the time to attend review classes, etc., we encourage everyone to make use of this free preparation material. You will be able to do practice tests, look at some videos of IELTS experts and previous test takers themselves, giving advice on how to answer some of the questions, etc. And if you're also taking the IELTS on computer, they also have some simulation tests, very similar to the IELTS on computer screen. So please do take advantage of that. I mentioned about the webinars. Actually, we do discuss these IELTS on computer features and everything on our bi-monthly webinars. We have the Ways to Ace IELTS, which I will be discussing with you also next week. So we will be going through each of the preparation material that we have in store for all of our test takers, right? So we have, okay, so if you, this link, please take note of this one if you're trying to take the IELTS on computer test, because this link will lead you to sample practice tests that will show you the different formats of the question. You will encounter the click and drag, the type, fill the gap, etc. So you'll be able to do that in these practice exercises that you can find in this link, all right? Yeah, so the same in this website, you'll also be able to watch the same videos I've shown you, and also some practice materials. So take note of these two slides, these two links, because these will be very, very helpful in your preparation for the IELTS on computer test. Okay, is there, okay, are there any other questions? Yes. Oh, Miss Kit is here with us tonight. She's helping out with some of the questions on the chat box. Would the online certificate issued VaxCert suffice? Yes, I think that, because I understand some would not have the cards, right? But yeah, you can definitely have the VaxCert printed. You have to print it. Right now, we're not accepting the pictures on your device that you know, bring the Vax card, the physical Vax card, or print a copy of your VaxCert. Okay. So before I end and before I leave you with this video, would there be any other questions about IELTS on computer or about IELTS taking IELTS with us. Again, thank you for those who have asked their questions about chat box. All right. I think there are no more questions. So, Sir Jeff, Miss Michelle.
Yes, Miss Danica.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's okay. This is actually the end of my presentation, so I'm just gonna show the video. But is there anything you'd like to announce to the group before we play the video?
Oh, it's okay. So after this, it will be well. Anyway, we would just like to thank you and the British Council, and we'll be looking forward next Thursday.
Yes, yes. I will
Yeah.
be next Thursday, and we'll be talking about the road to IELTS and announcing an exclusive promo for IFNG members as well. So
All right. Thank you, Miss Danica. Thank you, British
thank you,
Council,
Miss
once
Michelle.
again.
Thank you. All right. So I'll just play this video. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Thanks for joining us.
Behind those clean, crisp uniforms, warm smiles, and caring hands is you. You keep moving when the world is on a standstill. You are brave when most of us are afraid. You're at the bedside of every patient when no one else can be there for them. You cannot be with your families, so others can soon be with theirs. We see you and the extra shifts you take, your relentless courage and comforting care. And for that, we appreciate you and your sacrifices, putting your dreams on hold for the moment to save lives. Thank you. Know that we will support you when you finally pursue your own journey.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your presence tonight sa mga viewers sa Zoom and sa Facebook. And for those who were not able to get everything or to start to join us from the start, you may watch the replay or the video of this on our Facebook account as well on our YouTube account. All right. Thank you once again, and see you on Thursday for another British Council webinar, and tomorrow as well if you would want to join us. And for those who were looking for a speaking buddy, you can also message us from our Facebook account so we could include you to um, our group wherein you can join and practice your speaking. All right. Thank you once again, and God bless us all. Bye-bye.